of Shabbos. Let's bring up the page. This is it. And we're holding the laws of Amir al-Nakhri. Means what you could tell him, or not just say to a Gentile, but allow for a Gentile to do, who's not obligated to keep the Shabbos, within your property or work for you on the Shabbos. So now we're holding halacha hey, which is halacha 5. And I just want to say that we're going to, Barbara very nice to sponsor this year, Class A Aaron. But today specifically, we're also going to be learning in honor of my sister-in-law's nephew, who unfortunately over Shabbos has got into a severe situation through choking. His name is Meir Tzvi ben Maryasha Malka. He should have a refuah shalema. Mitach Klal Yisrael, and shall have a serious tovas. Okay, so we are talking about the laws of what we can and cannot have a Gentile, we could tell or have a Gentile do for you, us on the Shabbos. Now, we're going into the question of Maras Ayin. Maras Ayin is the prohibition or the concern of the word Maras Ayin of what people see. Meaning, how concerned do we have to be about what people assume is happening versus what's really happening? Meaning, someone a Gentile building your house, do people assume that that person is working for you, working for himself or herself? How concerned do we have to be with Maras Ayin? Maras Ayin is a concern in general of Torah, where a person may think something, and how concerned do we have to be what people think? And the Torah makes a lot of space for Maras Ayin, where if you give off, for instance, going into a non-kosher institution that would give off the impression that you are participating in whatever non-kosher is happening there, even if you're not. So how concerned do you have to be about these things? It's a question of Maras Ayin, and that applies to Shabbos. There's certain rules about Maras Ayin, meaning to say that one of the conditions for Maras Ayin is that if the assumption is true, has to be a mistake. It has to be wrong. Meaning to say, if someone assumes that this and this is happening, and also assumes that this and this is wrong, and A, it's not happening, and B, it's not even wrong. So just because a person doesn't know the law, that's not called Maras Ayin. Maras Ayin is if the person assumes is happening is wrong, but it's just not happening. So then the Torah gets involved. How concerned we have to be if others think that what's wrong is happening? But if a person thinks something is wrong and it's not wrong, and then thinks that it's happening, and even if it was happening, it's not wrong, that doesn't fall into the laws of Maras Ayin. That's a big distinction on Shabbos. For instance, if a person, where this comes into play is if, let's say, a person thinks that something is prohibited on Shabbos, and thinks that the Gentile is doing what is prohibited for you on Shabbos. It's not even prohibited. So then do I have to be concerned about the person's lack of knowledge of the law plus the person's lack of knowledge? It means the assumption has to be true. If the assumption itself isn't true, meaning to say that if the assumption was true, then there's a problem. So then there's a question of Maras Ayin. But if the person is assuming something, and even if it was true, it's not a problem, or it's not really happening. So then that's not the laws of Maras Ayin. Yes, Aaron.
Do we care only for
try to talk in the mic.
Non-Jew things.
Say that again.
Yeah, my headphones.
Can you hear me now?
A little better, not much, but go ahead.
Okay. When are we on the opinion that
We only care at this point
for the non-Jew what
he thinks, or we also think what the Jew might be thinking?
No, we're talking about what the Jew might be thinking. That's what we're going to learn. Let's see the law inside. But the question is what another Jewish person will be thinking. Therefore, it depends on if whatever's happening is within eyesight of someone that's Jewish. If it's out of the city where a Jewish person shouldn't be, because in Shabbos it's outside of the what's permissible to walk, so then we have no concern. Let's just see. It's a good question, but let's just see. Well, I mean, who are we concerned with? The same thing applies with Chil Hashem, a desecration of God's name. It's v'nikdashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael. The concern is not is mainly what a Jewish person is going to think. Here, let's go. Hamalacha lo tiev mechubel karka. So what we said until now, we gave what is permissible or prohibited for a Gentile to do on the Shabbos. But here, there's another condition, he says. And the condition is that whatever is being done, the malacha, the labor, is not something connected to the earth. It means if you're doing a tailor job, it's the tailor job. They could take the coat or whatever it is home to their office or to their tailor shop or home and do the work. But if they have to work on site, karka means it's connected to the land. It's connected to where your name is connected. So then it becomes an issue. For instance, it gives an example. Binyan ayavodas asada. If someone's going to build something in your field, so it's land dependent, right? It's being done in your field. So if the worker is doing something in your field, so now it's connected directly to you. So now here we're going to go into what are the concerns then. So he says like this: Kagain binyan ayavodas asada. Aval avodas ha binyan aser shiasa en Yehudi b'Shabbos alfa pisha Yisrael katzisimai kol schar ha binyan legamre. He says like this. One condition is loitia mechuber l'karka shouldn't be connected to the ground, like building or work in the field. But building is prohibited for non-Jew to do on Shabbos for the Jew, even if it's not a job that's by the day or the hour. But it could be the Jew, Alpha Pisha Yisrael, the Jewish person. Katzatz means he assigned the job for the entire building, meaning he said you have to build it. Didn't give it. It wasn't based that you have to build that on Shabbos. So then the person's wasn't hired to do a job for you on Shabbos. The person was hired to do a job for you. It included that the person is doing it on Shabbos. What happens then? So he says, let's see we'll see the footnotes for more explanation. In a very difficult or complicated situation, Yasa Shelas Chacham. So he says, when things get more complicated, as these things could get, you must speak to your local rabbi or an expert. So he says, and even to cut stones, or to fix beams for the building. If when this Gentile is doing it, it's obvious that this work is connected to a job for a Jewish person. Now we get into the idea of Marasain, and the Gentile is doing it in a public space where they see the Gentile working on a job, even though it could be preparing the stones or the beams, but it's not mowing the lawn or building in the ground, but it's preparing the products that will be put into the building. But it's in a public place, and everyone knows that it's being done for a Jew. Also, it's prohibited for it to be done on Shabbos. We'll see to what extent does the Jewish person have to protest if it's a job. The Gentile could say, listen, I want to do it on Shabbos. You paid me for a job. This is what works for me. Or to work in the field, to plow, to cut. These are all prohibitions on Shabbos. To do it in your gardening, in your field. Even if you hired the person, let's say you have a landscaping job, and the landscaping job was paid for the job. The person gave an estimate and said that this is how it's going to cost me $5,000 to do landscaping on your property. So the Gentile says it works for me, and let's say the Gentile wants to work let's say it turns out that it's you live in Seattle, right? Those who live in Seattle where the weather is so dicey, right? And you get a nice sun day, and that's a good day to go outside and do work in the landscaping. And the Gentile says, well, you know, this is a day for me to do it. I don't want to do it in the rain, right? So even though you didn't hire him to do it on Shabbos or her. So that's all cases where the person is doing a full job for you. It's being done in property, so it's public, and everyone knows this is the property of the Jew. This is the question of the Marasain, of what people are thinking. People don't know the relationship you have with the Gentile for this job. Hold on, Aaron. And he says, however, if the non-Jew is taking a part of the field, meaning he's working for himself. he doesn't get a salary or get paid for the job, but he is a person, he's a kablan, he takes part of the tfuah, part of the labor goes, the outcome of the labor, let's say in the case of harvesting the field, part of the harvest goes to the person. He's so to say, it's a kind of a partnership, even though you own the land 100%, but the labor is the partnership. And it's not that you have a isolated relationship or deal that's not common in the area, but that's how people do things. That the person, the kablan, the person who takes upon themselves the job of working the field gets a partnership in the outcome of the field, the payros, in the fruits. And that's the custom. So everyone knows the Gentile's working for him or herself. That's the custom, that the worker takes part of the labor, the outcome, the fruit. Then it's mutter, then it's permitted. We're going to get to your question in 1 second, Aaron. So now it goes to Aaron's question. Who are we concerned about seeing? So if the field is out somewhere in the middle of nowhere, right? It's an hour's drive from the city. So, and there's no Jew living there in that area that would see the Gentile work in the field. Then it's permitted, even if you're giving the person a set price. It means even though the person is not taking any part of the fruits, but there's no marasayin because there's no Jew who's going to see. So Aaron's question: what happens if a Gentile drives by on the Shabbos and sees and knows this field belongs to Jew? But the concern is that a Jew is going to see that a prohibition is done on Shabbos. We'll get to an obvious question in a second. The only thing is that you can't hire the Gentile on an hourly or daily wages, because then you hired the Gentile to do work for you on Shabbos. That's a prohibition in its own. What we were talking about until now is the concern of marasayin, of what people are going to think when they see a Gentile working your property. And because they can't take it home, and it has to be done, it's done either as a big job, like preparing the beams and stones. That's not a small job. Everyone can see that he's doing it, or she's doing it, or it's in your property itself. Then it becomes a problem. However, if your property is away from where Jewish people live, then it's not a question of marasayin because the Jewish person won't see. Before we get to Aaron's question, the obvious question is that unfortunately, what about in a situation where there are Jews that are not keeping Shabbos, or there's a percentage of Jews that are not keeping Shabbos? I'm asking a question that's an uncomfortable question, but it's a question, and it's not like it's a secret that you own the land. So a Jewish person could drive by because that person, he or she, is not keeping the Shabbos, unfortunately, and sees that the Gentiles working in the field. Obviously, the Torah has not made a precaution for that, even though maybe you would think that specifically for that person you should be concerned, because the person who's not keeping Shabbos, hopefully should be keep Shabbos, would learn something or assume something that's wrong, but the Torah doesn't take that into account. Yes, Aaron. Aaron?
Okay, my question is, he's working on your...
Aaron, I think you're going to have to reconnect.
Okay, I connect. You good?
I'm hearing you very muffled.
Okay.
Sometimes not at all.
You hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is,
he's on your property. He's preparing the beams and everything. You told him you got 2 weeks to finish it. He says, I can do it in 2 weeks. No problem. You tell him, I just want you to take off on, and you knew that everyone gets 1 day off. And you say, take Saturday off because of Shabbos. And he says, but my Shabbos is on Sunday. I have to work on Saturday to meet your needs.
because he's a Gentile.
But let's see the footnotes about that. Because the footnotes get that, not exactly that question, but it's the question where the Gentile says, "I'm sorry, I don't accept what you're asking for me." So let's see these footnotes. They say like this: so construction workers are forbidden through a non-Jew on Shabbos, even if you have stipulated the wages of the entire construction job. So footnote number 12: since the construction work are open into a public view, and people know that it is your project, because everyone knows who's the owner, they will suspect that the non-Jew works for you on Shabbos, and they won't be aware of the fact that you did it in a permissible manner. According to halacha, you are not allowed to do something which places you under the suspicion of wrongdoing. So that's the idea of marasayin. That's the fundamentals of the law. Again, It's only if the assumption is you did something wrong. Again, in this case, the assumption is that the Gentile is a hourly worker or daily worker. That is prohibited. And because that's the assumption, and if that's what if that's what would have been happening, it would be Asr and Shabbos, and people may assume that that's what the job requires, or that's the setup of the job. Therefore, it's forbidden. In theory, if someone again suspects something, and the suspicion, if it's true, is not a prohibition, it's just that your lack of understanding of either the situation or the law, then that's not a question of Marasai. Okay, number 3, your question is going to be asked. Aaron, Shulchan Aruch 24. We're talking about the cutting the stones, preparing the wood beams for a building for the purpose if it's known that they belong to a Jew. So and it's then and the non-Jew works in out in public, so people see the worker. That's why he says big things, beams, stones. Where a tailor job, a person doesn't sit outside in the street and sew pants. So he says like this: Shulchan Aruch 244:2. Two rules that even if the non-Jew does it in his own house, it is not permitted. Chaye Adam. Rules that it is forbidden only when it's known to the public that the stones or the beams belong to Jew, which is because otherwise it's not a problem. Because if it's not known that it belongs to Jew, no one knows that he's doing, or no one's assuming that this was a job that was hired even to be done on, even if it was done on Shabbos. No one knows that he's working for the non-Jew because it's not it's not really connected to the property. Number 14 is, in other words, this is the usual practice that you pay a person that he takes part of the fruits. I know definitely your question was brought up. Maybe it's in the next law. In chapter 24, chapter 95, he says, including yourself. Hold on, Barbara. Including yourself, meaning even if you're the only Jew living there, that's a problem. Before we get to Barbara's question, Aaron, I said maybe it's in the next law, but there's definitely a question. We're going to get to the question if, like you said, if the Gentile says that it's a 6-day job and I want to rest on Sunday and you ask me to rest on Shabbos, what you have to do in such a situation. It's going to be addressed in a second. Yes, Barbara.
I was just going to say, I would think maybe because it was saying there in that one that even if the Jew does it on his own and you're not aware of it, it still would be this issue because somebody would think you had given him permission, or a Jew had given them permission to do this, even though you hadn't. You had said, okay, no, I would prefer you don't work on Shabbat, but the person goes ahead and does it anyway.
Okay, so we're gonna see what happens. These questions that you and Aaron are asking about where the Gentile, where you protest or you condition the Gentile, and the Gentile either doesn't agree or does it anyways. What is the situation then? What happens in such a situation? So let's see. Sif number 4. Number 6. Im banu goyim Yisrael bais b'Shabbos b'Yisr. Let's say the non-Jew just does it. He builds the house for you on your property in a way it's not permissible, because we just said it's not permissible to have a Gentile work on your property in any condition, even if he's getting paid for the job, not by the day, on the Shabbos. So what should you do then? So the Kitzur says, you should not. It's proper that you should not move into this place. It means you shouldn't move into the house that was built in a way that was prohibited on Shabbos. And he says there's many details to this law, because this is the Kitzur. He doesn't discuss all the details of the law, but I think in 16 he does go into some of the details. So he says like this: if he worked on a contractual basis and within the tchum, okay, so these are the two problems. If the Gentile's working on the hour, it's prohibited because the Gentile's working for you on Shabbos and you're paying the Gentile to work for you on Shabbos. However, if you give the job a contractual, it's called kablanis, where you're not paying them to work on Shabbos, you're paying them for the job. But it's within the tchum, it's within the area where other Jewish people are going to be, and are going to assume that you possibly hired the Gentile for the hour, for the day, and the Gentile is working for you on Shabbos, and everyone thinks that because of that, everyone thinks you're violating the Shabbos. So he says, if you worked on a contractual basis, which means what happened was not prohibited, But it's within the tchum, it's within the boundaries of where you're permitted to be on Shabbos. And allowed, so then he says, if you worked in a contractual basis and within the tchum, you are allowed to move in if it already happened. Because there was no really prohibition that happened here. It was just the assumption of the prohibition. And it happened already. It's b'diavad, it happened. So then you can move in. But it's proper to refrain from using it. I don't understand what it means to move in and not use it, but it seems like it's better that you shouldn't move in, is what he's saying. Hold on, Aaron. However, if he worked and was paid by the day, means what happened was it was a prohibition on Shabbos. The assumption was right. You did violate the Shabbos. You are prohibited from using it. You should never move into the house. And he quotes the Bach, Magen Avram, Chai Adam, and the Mishnah Berurah. Yes, Aaron.
Okay. Using as an example, Brooklyn and New York being tons of Jews and very expensive to live.
Okay. I can't hear. I only hear a quarter of the question.
Okay. You hear me now?
No, you're very muffled.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. If using as an example, Israel and New York, Brooklyn, there's tons of Jews and living there is very expensive. If you don't move in, then you've lost maybe $1 million. So how could that happen? And it wasn't your fault.
So again, he quoted initially that you shouldn't do it. If you did it, means we're talking about the case where it is your fault. We're not talking about the case where you asked the Gentile not to do it. You shouldn't have hired Gentiles to work in your house, but what you did was not prohibited. It means there was no hourly work done. It was just a job, but you didn't make sure the Gentile doesn't work on Shabbos. So what you didn't actually violate the Shabbos. You violated the concern that people would think you violated the Shabbos, called Marasayin. So in that case, he says that it's okay to move in, but better not, but it's okay to move in. If you actually did a violation, you actually paid the Gentile to work for you by the hour, by the day, which means, i.e., the Gentile worked for you on the Shabbos, then it's prohibited. You cannot move in. You actually, not only were you not concerned with giving off the wrong impression, you actually violated the Shabbos. Yes, Barbara, you want to ask something, or is your hand still up?
Yeah, no, I had a question. So like when you buy a house that's brand new and you haven't contracted to have the house built, you're just buying it. The contractors built these houses and you're in there buying. And you don't know if somebody's worked on Shabbat or not. What would be the ruling in that case?
Because your name is not on the house yet. The problem over here is that your name is on the house, meaning you're known as the property owner. Here, you're not the property owner.
Okay. So I could go ahead and buy that house and I would be okay.
No, that's because your relationship with the house only starts once you own the house.
Okay.
Let me just say, hello?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Okay, so
We've got all these questions because this is a good topic. But my question is, okay, so he won't stop working on Saturday. So you say, I'm not paying you on Saturday, but I'll give you a double portion on Sunday.
And you're talking in the case where there's a conversation between the Gentile and the Jew about this. Until now, there's no conversation yet. The Jew never told the Gentile not to work on Shabbos.
That I didn't know. I thought we were having a conversation.
No, we're not holding there yet. First, we're talking about what happened. The halacha says what you should do, and you didn't do it. So you hired the workers for a contractual job, so there was no violation of the Shabbos, but you didn't look after the concern of Marasayin of what people would assume, and you're within the Tchum of Shabbos. So what would you do then? Then you move in, but if you hire them by the hour, you cannot move in. Now he goes into the situation. If you gave them, this is your question. If you gave the non-Jew work on a contractual basis, and it's within the tchum, okay, so you've done the contract, which means it's not a violation of Shabbos because you're not paying for the Shabbos. However, it's in the tchum, it's in the area where Jews live and know that you are the owner of this property. So now it says you must make it a conditional that he not work on the Shabbos. It means you have to actually, it's not enough you have to actually have a condition with the Gentile. Do not work on Shabbos. I'm telling you not to work on Shabbos. Now comes your question. If he breaks this clause and works on the Shabbos, what happens then? So this is your question. You've asked him not to. And he says, well, you don't own my time. You're paying me for my job, and your Jewish religion is not my problem, right? So this question is already asked by the Mordechai and the Vilna Gaon. So he says the Mordechai and the Vilna Gaon rule that you need not even attempt to stop him. You said what you had to say, so it means you did what you had to do. You're not violating the Shabbos because it's on contract. The idea of Maras Ayin, of being concerned, you tried the best you could. You made a contract. You made a clause in the contract. That's it. So if the person's violating, the person's violating. That doesn't, although, we're not learning this sugya, this subject in the depth. The question is, what is really the problem of Maras Ayin? Maras Ayin means, again, what people see and think and have the impression of what's happening. So here, the concern is that someone thinks that this person is an hourly worker, but he's not. So there's no violation of Shabbos, but the person thinks. But as you did the best you can to be concerned with that by making a contract, and in the contract stipulating he shouldn't work on Shabbos. Now he's violating that. But at the end of the day, is you haven't, although you've done what you have to do, you haven't changed the fact that someone else may think that that's not the case. So obviously, what the Mordechai and the Vilna Gaon are saying is it's you don't even have to attempt to stop him, because Maras Ayin is your participation in causing someone to think that you violated the Shabbos, and you have no participation because you told the guy not to do it. So therefore, there's no participation, even though it hasn't changed the fact what the person who's looking is thinking. But he says the Mishnah Brura rules like the Magen Avram. That doesn't agree with the Gra, the Gaon of Vilna, and the Mordechai. And Eliyahu Rabbah that says that you should protest, because at the end of the day, it doesn't help that you've made a stipulation, because it doesn't change the facts on the ground. The person who's looking still thinks. But you do not have to pay him to stop working on the Shabbos. That's your question. To actually say to the person, listen, the person says, well, you gave me a job. So you say, I'll pay you $100. Please don't work on Shabbos. That far you don't have to go. If you fail to make this condition, what happens if you haven't made the condition? So you may be required even to pay money to prevent him from doing the work on Shabbos, because then you had a negligence. And what was the negligence? The negligence was you didn't take care of what you should have taken care of preventing it from happening. So if we want to break it down, there's a whole bunch of issues here. The first one is that you haven't said anything at all, and it's on a contractual basis. It's within the tchum, it's within the area of Shabbos. So it says at the end of the day is you're allowed to move in, but it's proper from refraining from using it. I don't understand the difference between moving in and refraining from using it. I think what he means to say is try not to move in. But if he says, if you paid by the day, then you violated Shabbos, you cannot move in. And now he goes into the question is that if you did it on contractual basis in the Chum, what should you do initially? So initially you should put in the contract, if the Gentile violates the contract, so the Gra and the Mordechai say, that's not your problem, you've done what you can do. The Magen Avram rules, like the Mishnah Brura rules, like the Magen Avram that says, you still have to protest, however, you don't have to pay money. And in the third case, where you didn't make it a contract, then you would have to even pay the Gentile not to work on Shabbos. Means go as far as a financial loss, because you had negligence in not preparing the contract properly. All right. Any other questions on this law? Okay, let's move forward. If you have a field or a mill, means it's a business. Mutter lahaskir le'en Yehudi. Now the question is, are you allowed to rent out? It means if we're saying the idea is that property that belongs to you has your name on it, and the Gentile is not allowed to do work, and people are thinking the Gentile is doing work for you on Shabbos, so seemingly the same thing would apply if you lease out the property, because maybe people are not aware of the fact that you leased it out, and would assume also that the person is working for you on Shabbos. He says, then you're allowed to lease it out to a non-Jew, Even if the non-Jew is going to be running the mill or the field, using the field on the Shabbos. However, we'll see why. But a bathhouse you cannot rent out a bathhouse up for that Gentile will use that will be open on Shabbos. Let's say you want to sublet the bathhouse. It means you are on a lease and want to give over the lease to someone else, and in a way of business, not a way that you're getting yourself off the contract, but part of your business is to lease businesses and lease them out. Because here we have a situation where your name isn't on it as ownership, but you have a general lease, right? So you're leasing something to be leased out. Let's say you lease long-term and you lease it out short-term. So does your long-term lease kind of make you as if you're the owner and then prohibit you from doing a short-term lease to a Gentile that's going to be open on the Shabbos? Aaron, let me just finish the law. Let's say you have a hotel or milbana or a brick factory or beis yitzika lizchuchias or a glass factory. These are more complicated laws that have to be asked and dealt with by a rabbinic professional. Yes, Aaron.
So
There's a kosher hotel in Borough Park, and they have non-Jews working for them, doing all sorts of stuff. I don't know exactly what, but it's a hotel, and they're open on Shabbos.
Well, the question of what the Gentile is doing on Shabbos is it depends what kind of labor the Gentile is doing. The Gentile is not allowed to paint on Shabbos or do things that are prohibited, but if you're giving the job to wash the house, and the Gentile could do it in a way that's permissible on Shabbos, and she chooses to do it in a way that violates the Shabbos, that's not your problem. We've already discussed, like, if you tell someone to wash the dishes and the person on their own puts on the dishwasher, because that's different than if you tell the person to do construction on the site.
okay.
So basically what the Shulchan Aruch says over here is, why is a bathhouse different than a lease of a mill? Is because the bathhouse, it says, this applies also to other holdings where the owner's identity is usually well known. A bathhouse in those days.
Sorry, Mandy.
Hello? The bathhouse in those days was more identified, was more connected to the owner, was very much connected to the owner. So something that's really connected to the owner is even if you rent it out, you shouldn't rent it out. Whereas fields and mills have less kind of identity. Who owns this field? Who owns this mill? As opposed to say, everyone, let's go to John's, bathhouse. In the situation of renting out a factory or a hotel, he says one should look into the Mishnah Brura in 243. Okay, so that's for more details. But basically, and the question of a sublease of a general lease also is a question. Okay. So basically, what we see from this law is that this law is kind of vague because it's more complicated and detailed. What we see from this law is the responsibility of the person's connection to the connection the person has to the property, and how would it apply? Again, there's a lot of people, like, the same idea about the question of the merchats would be possibly a question that people lease buildings and then lease out the part they take over lease and they manage the building and they get all the money from the income of renting out the offices, etc. These are questions that could be asked. Okay, the Beis Yisrael, in the house of the Jewish person themselves. This is your question. Then it's a prohibition for the Gentile to do any prohibited work in any way. Even if the worker is your servant. We've already tackled this, but he's saying it again. You have to protest if the person's going to even doing work for themselves, but they're doing it, and it's something that's a prohibition. Let's just see the footnotes on this. It says malacha here refers to the categories of work that are forbidden on Shabbos, not just something that it's actually forbidden on Shabbos. Number 20, he says, people may think that he is doing it for you. So therefore, even if he's doing it for himself, you have to be concerned. And he says you must protest. He says, if a non-Jew visits your house and does a melacha for you with his own utensils. In other words, he turns on his own flashlight without you asking him to do so. You need not protest. However, you may not derive benefit from it lest you ask him to do it, because if you're allowed to take benefit, let's say the Gentile walks in and turns on the flashlight, and then now you're going to use it to look for something. That's prohibited. But if the Gentile comes to your house and turns on the flashlight themselves with their own utensils, then that's not you don't have to protest. This comes to the question of when it comes to opening up a light or something like that on Shabbos. Okay, Uman. I think we have 2 more laws, 3 more laws. So see if how much further we could get and open to questions. Uman Eini Yehudi. Sha'asa Malbush B'Shvil Yisrael, a Gentile laborer or professional that makes a garment for a Jew. You hire them to make you a dress or a suit. And Shabbos, and they come on the Shabbos. They didn't work for you in the house, and it doesn't necessarily mean they worked for you on the Shabbos. They just came to deliver the outfit on Shabbos. So the question is, are you allowed to wear it now? You have it in your house. They dropped it off Friday afternoon after the Shabbos, right? You want to wear it Shabbos day for the shul. So it says, mutar l'lavsha, you're allowed to wear it. V'im you do a shagamri b'Shabbos, but if you knew for a fact that the reason they came to you Friday after, or Shabbos morning after the Shabbos came in, is because they were working up until that point, and you're aware of that fact, he says, then you shouldn't wear it unless it's a must or something very important. But you are not allowed to take vessels in a way that's permissible to carry, or clothing from the house of or from the store of a professional. Even if that professional is a Jew, you can't take on the Shabbos Yom Tov. It means you can't go to a shop. The owner says, let's go to the shop and take something. You're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. And we'll see in the footnotes why. What about a non-professional, non-Jew? He himself is not the laborer, but he owns the shoe. She owns a shoe store. Means they're just they're resellers, right? Like most stores today. Then you're allowed to walk into the Gentile's shop, who definitely didn't make it because that's not his job. He doesn't make clothing. So no one assumes. See here, the question is like this. Again, we're breaking down the categories. If this is custom-made clothing, that the person who you've hired the person to make the clothing, not to sell you the clothing, they're not the same thing. It means there's work being done for you possibly on Shabbos. So he says if he drops it off, if you hire someone a tailor to make you a clothing, and he drops it off before Shabbos, you could wear it on the Shabbos. If you know for a fact that the Gentile did this job for you and completed it on Shabbos, and that's why he or she came on the Shabbos, so then he says you should not wear it unless in a great necessity. To go into a tailor that does the labor itself and take things or work vessels that they make, not that they sell, that they make, means what they're doing is a prohibition on Shabbos. You're not allowed to go in, and even not allowed to go into a place that's owned by a Jew that does this, that's a tailor or a craftsman. If it's just a shop, means there's no labor being done. It's just a sales shop. Like you walk in to a Gentile small shop that has underwear. Let's say you ran out of underwear or shirts or clothing, and it's not it's obvious that the seller. It's obvious to everyone that the seller is not the laborer. So nothing was done for you on Shabbos. You're just picking up something, and you will settle the bill after Shabbos. So then, if it's a non-Jew, it's mutter. It's permitted to take it. Then he continues. to take for them on Shabbos. The only condition is you can't make a transaction. So you can't say, okay, how much does this cost? I'll pay you $100 for the cost after the Shabbos. Then you're doing a business deal. And it also has to be clear that the Gentile didn't bring it in from outside the area before the Shabbos. It means if it's something that comes in on export or it gets imported and it's obvious and there's a concern that it was done on Shabbos, then it's something else. But if the store is stocked and always stocked, and it's clear that anything that they're selling in the store was brought before Shabbos, and you're not talking money, you're just picking up something, it's permitted. Listen, here in Yerushalayim, I don't know, it could be in New York, it's Brooklyn as well. They have non-Jewish stores. There's a store here in the old city, non-Jewish stores where the neighborhood Jews come into the shop. It's owned by a Gentile, and they just take things. They don't say, they just, they'll grab a bag, a mayonnaise bottle and something else, and he sits there writing down everything you take. So he didn't make the food, and he didn't bring the food on Shabbos, and he's just marking it down. You're not talking to him, you're not having a transaction. And after Shabbos, you settle your bill, or it gets included in the rest of your bill, and that's being done all the time in Jerusalem. Yes.
Never seen it, and even the Jewish stores are not writing down what you buy, and then you settle later. Some do, but a lot of them are stopping it.
A Jewish store would be prohibited. This is talking about a Gentile store.
Yeah, but
Then
I've never seen it.
Yeah, okay.
I've never seen it in Brooklyn. I never heard about it in Israel either.
Yeah. They have, and I know the shop. So he says like this. What?
You go there?
No, I don't live in that area, but I know that people.
But now my question
is it just some people say even though it's permitted, it's not in the spirit of Shabbos? Is this in that realm?
Yeah, it's not a situation where a person is shopping on Shabbos, where you're coming out with grocery bags. It's a situation where it's clear the person ran out of something small. So then it may not be in the spirit of Shabbos, but it's that you have to weigh that against the simcha of Shabbos, the happiness and the onik of Shabbos. So if, for instance, you have no salt and no oil and no mayonnaise, the small things that your Shabbos is going to be less pleasant because you're missing it, it's different than that you have to take that into account versus the spirit of Shabbos. Okay, so he says like this, but if it's known that he completed on Shabbos, he may not wear it. So he says, until sufficient time has elapsed after Shabbos, then you have to wait. If you know for sure the person finished it on Shabbos, then you would wait how long? Let's say the person waited an hour. So the person did an hour's labor on Shabbos and you know that they did it. So wait an hour after Shabbos. It means you shouldn't even put it on Saturday night right after the Shabbos goes out. Wait, don't benefit from the Shabbos. So then you're waiting anyways that hour and you didn't gain anything. Or so until the sufficient time has elapsed after Shabbos to accomplish the work that was done on the Shabbos. That's the concept of Bichtei Shiyasa. Okay, so we're going to finish this last sif here. Unless it's of extreme necessity. In other words, that you have no other shop when you go. Now he has to explain what does it mean extreme necessity. Not just that you're very upset because you wanted to wear that shirt or that dress. So he says, in other words, that and you have other clothing to wear. In other words, that you have no other Shabbos garment. If let's say you have the person is fixing your kapata, your Shabbos, man's jacket, long jacket, and you have no other kapata. So that would be an extreme situation. And even then, it is permitted only when the tailor worked on Shabbos in order to finish the job, and not when he did it so in order for you to enjoy it sooner. It means just because he took upon himself a job, and to add to the job is something else, is that the person's allowed to, in an extreme situation, wear it. But if the tailor worked on Shabbos in order to finish the job, in order to finish the job, but not when he did so in order for you to enjoy it sooner. If he did it on Shabbos to accommodate your needs, you are forbidden to wear it until after the Shabbos, even if that's your only garment for Shabbos. So you go with your short jacket to the synagogue. He brings the Mishnah Berurah, you are allowed to have indirect benefit from the work that a non-Jew did for you on the Shabbos, and you're allowed to hint to him to do it. In other words, you say, I cannot eat the tuna fish because the can is closed. If you don't want to open the can on Shabbos, in these cases, you benefit from the tuna is indirect for the malacha is done to the can and not to the tuna. Okay, that's another. We're going to get to those laws it's another subject. I don't want to get too caught up because we have a little short amount of time. Okay, what about if he says to go to a Jewish craftsman who has already prepared clothes, you're not allowed to walk into the store on Shabbos or Yom Tov? He says you cannot send a non-Jew to take it for you either. So it means not only are you not allowed to walk into a Jewish shop, you shouldn't send a Gentile, let's say someone who works for you, to go to the shop and to pick up the garment. If you are absolutely needed for it needed for the Shabbos, you may take it from him in a way that will not be noticed. So if you're in an extreme situation and the Jewish person says you have no shirt, all your shirts are spoiled, you have no shirt to wear. So then the Jew, you could try to get in a way that no one will see that you could take from the Jewish shop on Shabbos. But if it's a non-Jew, he goes, if the non-Jew is not a craftsman, just a store owner, so the author agrees with the Magen Avram that permits this, even if he is a craftsman who makes shoes and sells them to the public, as long as they are not custom made. So the Magen Avram says that even if the person is a craftsman, but just makes per size, not per person, it's not custom, then you're allowed to go into such a shop, even if the person making the shoes is the store owner, because again, he's not making it at all for you. Everyone knows that he just makes shoes, or she just makes shoes to sell. And he finishes off the last case over here, which is in the case that says a Jew who knows him well is permitted to take the shoes from Shabbos and wear them. You provided the price of the merchandise now established. Okay, so he said, and it's not brought from outside the tchum. If these goods are needed for a mitzvah, let's say you need to make a bris and you have no food or whatever, you don't have no wine, you may rely on the opinion of the Rosh and use them immediately after Shabbos. It means then you don't have to wait. Let's say you know the person drove it on Shabbos and it's a 20-minute drive, but you have to make a mitzvah on Motzei Shabbos right afterwards, then you don't have to wait till after the Shabbos. So, and this is talking about the case, we're going to stop here. This is talking about the case of the person who has a shop that's bringing stuff from outside of the boundary on Shabbos. On the Shabbos, then you don't have to wait because you're doing it for a mitzvah. So what didn't we really tackle over here? We didn't tackle really over here the case of the indirect talk, and then we'll get back to that. We'll start from there next week about indirect talk, which is not connect, where the person is not doing something for you specifically, like opening the can of tuna, as opposed to you just eating the tuna, you're not eating the can. Yes, Aaron.
Okay, in most stores, you don't have to discuss with the person the price because the price is on a sign. So does that mean you can't take it only when there's no price?
No, because you're not, because the idea is that you're not kind of engaging in a take, back and forth. Like, if it's a set price, it's actually the best thing because there's no negotiating. It's not like a mekach memkar, not like you're negotiating a price. It's just this is the price and everyone knows it and it's non-negotiable. When there's a price tag, it's in most cases, you're not going to go to the supermarket and ask for a discount. So then it's you're just taking it out. Everyone knows if you're taking something from the store, you have to pay for it. But the idea is the negotiation part, the handling of it, the price back and forth. But if it's a food bank that's free, it's obviously not a problem. Here we're talking about a case where you're going to end up paying for it, but you're just not dealing with the price now. Okay, any other questions? Alrighty then. So Laila Tov, everyone. And again, these are not the easiest laws because the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is not getting into the details, and we're going to get more into details when we learn the Shemirath Shabbos Kehilchathah. We're just doing the basic learning of the Kitzur now, and Be'ezrat Hashem we'll get into more detail, especially when it comes to jobs like opening the light or doing things benefiting from work that is done on Shabbos. And in what ways is that permissible, and in what cases does that remain prohibited?
One comment.
In the bookstore, this is a couple volumes in one set, just on the Gentile working for a Jew.
Yes,
I saw it in the Jewish store.
Yeah, it's a very complicated subject.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.